All right. Hi, Cornell. Hi, Shelby. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Vonvo.com. Today's date is May 5th, 2013, and we're here to discuss gay rights in America and even the Jason Collins, coming out that took place this past weekend, or this past week. Just before we get started, I wanted to go over two quick things. The first is that right now this conversation is being recorded, and after the recording is completed, we'll be uploading this video to the internet to our YouTube channel. Is that okay with both of you?
Yeah.
Great. And then on top of that, here at Vonvo, we're all about our discussion staying both civil and valuable. Are you guys fine with there not being any personal attacks or anything along those lines?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So let's get our conversation started. Shelby, since this is your first time on Vonvo, would you mind just giving a quick background of yourself and why you're so passionate about this topic, as well as, and then Cornell, you can go right afterwards.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm Shelby. I started a group called Stand Up, Shout Out, which basically is about standing up specifically to your friends online when they make jokes at other people's expense, especially like anti-gay jokes or rape jokes or racist jokes. So that's sort of how I really got involved in this. Was I had a lot of friends who were hurt by those kinds of jokes and that kind of culture, and I thought it would be good to stand up against that.
Cool.
Okay. I'm really interested in this issue, and it means a lot to me because one, it's an issue that is very much at the forefront of popular conversation, and this is a general conversation we're having in this country. And as somebody that grew up in a particularly religious and a spiritual household, I feel like it's really important for somebody like me to actually speak up and say that I believe gay rights are the same as the rights any citizen has in this country. And I wish I heard more people of faith, whatever faith, speaking out for gay rights, and that's why I'm here.
Great. So Shelby, just to be clear, so your organization that you started, exactly what really happens over there, and you want to maybe tie it into exactly how it relates to the entire topic as a whole, because it sounds like it does, right?
Yeah. So right now the organization is just sort of me.
That's okay.
So not very much is going on right now.
Gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, because of finals. But I have a few people who are really interested in helping me, and I'm really interested in getting to know them, and we have lots of meetings set up. So, but we talk about I talk about gay issues on my Tumblr, on my blog, on my Twitter, on the Facebook page a lot, because I think that those kinds of jokes can be especially hurtful out of a lot of other jokes at people's expense.
Right. So the idea is really behind, the name calling which takes place. Is that really it? Okay.
Yeah. It's sort of the normalization of hurtful comments.
Right. So that's been, the idea of name calling. I mean, that's been a pretty, popular in a negative light in the news when it comes to this subject. Is that correct? Like, there's been a lot of, people have done some horrible things that have resulted in, whether it be like suicide or whatnot, right? That when it comes to gay rights, I mean, can you kind of talk about that?
Yeah, so there are actually a lot of other groups that specifically talk about the issue of suicide in the gay community, like the Trevor Project and the It Gets Better Project, because it is a really big issue, especially who are openly gay in high school or even in college or in their normal life. A lot of times what happens is their family members and their close friends won't accept that about them, even though it's a really integral part of who they are. Or they might never come out and grow up hearing jokes like, oh, that guy's such a, he's such a fag, and don't ever be a fag, you have to be a real man. Or what a dyke, no one's ever going to want to fuck her. Things like that. Sorry. Sorry for the language. But people grow up hearing that from family members and from friends and from people they look up to. And I think it's it's one of the factors that can really factor into wanting to hurt yourself or not feeling like you're worthwhile.
Right. Cornell, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, specifically to the, I guess the rap community, maybe the urban community, the phrase like, "Hey, that's gay," or "Don't be gay," or "Don't be," as Shelby said, "Don't be a fag." It's really ridiculous because in doing that, they're so often perpetuating the same kind of negativity that a lot of, or maybe not a lot, but quite a few of the raps will, speak against. So they talk about things going on, in their neighborhood, crime, drugs, stuff like that, all these things that they want no part of. And yet what they don't understand is when they're using words like, "Hey, that's so gay," or "Don't be gay," or "Don't be a fag," or "Don't be," things like that, they're absolutely perpetuating that same cycle of negativity. And they, like I said, they don't even realize it. And it's something that, I've heard before. I've worked with, quite a few kids in college and high school, and I've heard them say that. And I do the best I can, and I've done the best I can to stop and say, what do you mean by that? And to ask. And sometimes they don't even know. Sometimes they're just saying, like Shelby, pointed out, what they've heard other people say. And so that they kind of, piece together what it means and how you use it. And then when asked, "Hey, what do you mean by that?" Yeah, they don't actually know. They just are saying what they think sounds cool. And, sometimes when I've asked them to tell me, "What do you mean by that? And why are you saying that?" They'll stop. And I'm like, "Don't stop. No, let me know why you're saying that. You need to know why you're using the words that you're using, because they matter and they make a difference." And when you just say things that other people say without knowing what they mean or how they can be, construed, you're being ignorant. And, I don't think you want to be ignorant. So let's talk about why you're using the words you use.
Right. Shelby, what do you think about that? Is Cornell right on when it comes to that point?
I think definitely. I think that people like to model the behavior that they surround them, especially by their friends. And sometimes people don't really understand the impact that their words have. For instance, I had a friend who would say that things were faggy, and he knew several people who were gay and lesbian, and he was friends with them. And sometimes we would tell him, that's hurtful. We don't like that. Please don't say that. And sometimes the answer you get is like, "Oh, they're just words," or "Oh, I didn't know that, you felt that way." And it's sort of disheartening sometimes because it feels like the onus is on you, the person who's upset, to let them know that what they're doing is wrong. And you sort of wish they would just know, because it seems like common sense. But I think in some ways it's not, because it's just so commonplace.
Right.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. It's like I said, it's people using words and language that they're not really thinking about. They just say it because they want to fit in, they want to sound cool. And then, when they realize, "Okay, wait, this is really hurtful, I'm not really thinking about this," more often than not, they stop, or at least they work on stopping. It may be something that's so ingrained in how they speak that, it's more difficult to do. And still, when people really understand the power of their words, it makes a big difference.
Right. So how much progress is really being made on this front, Shelby? Because I mean, is it really going to be sort of like a next generation thing that this sort of vocabulary will stop being used? Because I mean, I know, I'm not going to lie, I know that I've said stuff like that. I know that friends of mine, will say stuff like that. It just sort of like, it's almost like where it rolls off the tongue to a certain extent, and you don't even think about it. So what are the proper things that people can do now to prevent doing that? Or or is it going to be really like sort of a next generation thing where the next generation growing up, because there's more, gay rights will be a lot more out there and more recognizable. It won't make sense for other generations to really like speak in that sort of tone.
Well, I think that it's beyond the next generation, actually. Because there are so many issues at play when we talk about gay rights issues. For instance, the way that gay men specifically are seen in society is sort of seen through the lens of hatred of women, right? Like, oh, if you're acting not manly, you must be gay. Like, that's so gay of you to, to not shoot the ball right. Oh, you're so gay. Like, that man must be gay because he's dressed femininely. So there's that issue at play. There's also a lot of race issues at play. And cultural issues. A lot of cultures have a lot of different feelings about gay rights. And that's not to say that there have never been any cultures that accepted this, or even like transgenderness and things like that. Because there have been and there are, and all cultures accept it to different degrees. So I think that there are a lot of different things and a lot of institutional things that are at play when we talk about gay rights issues, such that it won't be solved by our generation or the next generation, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to work towards solving it, because it's our attempts that help the next generation make better attempts until eventually it's solved. And I think an important thing to do is to be aware. Like, that's a really important thing. For instance, like, I didn't know until recently that, like, when we learn about sex ed in high school, there's almost no talk about relationships, same-sex relationships at all across America. And that's like the first step, is talking about, same-sex relationships, talking about same-sex marriage, reading books by gay people, learning about gay lifestyles in school. I mean, I think that's an important step. And then telling our children, like, you should learn about this. You should go on the internet. You should find out more beyond what you learn in school. And accepting people, obviously, is another thing important.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that you mentioned, and Max, I don't know, did you see where Chris W. was? I don't know if he just couldn't see people on screen, or
sorry, I'll type in there in a second. Sorry, it's the phone. I'm blaming everything on the phone today.
It's interesting, Joe, that you bring up the idea of gay lifestyles and gay relationships, and I get the benefit of doing that and highlighting that and pointing that out. I wonder whether or not it would do more to include that in the overall conversation of relationships in general, as opposed to saying, hey, let's talk about, gay relationships, let's talk about gay lifestyles, because in general, I don't necessarily see those who are gay really doing much different than those who are not gay, other than, being in a relationship or preferring sexually partners who are of the same gender. But as far as fashion and movies and food and any number of things that people usually associate with lifestyle and with how people live, I generally feel like homosexuals are really just like anybody else. And what I would like, maybe instead of taking a moment to point this different thing out, I feel like it might do more on the long term to just include it more in the overall conversation that we have when we talk about relationships, when we talk about sex, when we talk about safe sex, all of those things.
Yeah, I agree with that, except, for relationships, I definitely agree. A gay relationship is just a type of relationship. There are many different types of relationships. But I think that another thing, but as far as gay lifestyle goes, I think that while gay people are just like people in almost every way, you have to accept that there's definitely a power play that affects gay people uniquely. Gay people are uniquely affected by the fact that gay people are uniquely affected by the fact that they're often put down by their straight counterparts, by the fact that there's such a thing as gay rights and not such a thing as straight rights as we know it.
Right.
And they have a unique history. I mean, I think that the AIDS crisis uniquely affected gay people, and it uniquely oppressed gay people. I mean, it was originally called GRID. I forget what it all stands for, but I know the G was gay. Oh, I'm sorry. You know, it was originally called GRID instead of AIDS or HIV. People thought it only affected gay people. People suffer, say, HIV and AIDS as a punishment to gay people. And I think that's unique to the lifestyle and history of all gay people. They share that straight people can't ignore, is what I'm trying to say when I said that we have different lifestyles. It's something that we should bring to light. Even the fact that when you watch TV, how many characters are gay or lesbian? And how many of the gay or lesbian characters aren't sort of outed as being gay or lesbian? You know, for how many of them is that not, you know, the main part of their character? They're not usually very dynamic beyond the fact that they have same-sex relationships.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree, and I think it's an interesting point you bring up as far as how you know, homosexuals in popular culture, TV shows, movies, their homosexuality tends to be such a huge part of whatever part of the story that they're in. So instead of them being, you know, an engineer who is gay, they are a gay engineer, you know, or a gay agent or something like that. So like they have to carry the flag for all that is gay in that show.
Yeah, like oftentimes a gay character will be held up as, you know, the example of all gay people. You know, this is what gay people must be like because this man is gay or this woman is gay. And if they make a mistake, it must be a mistake that all gay people make. And I think that that's often a problem. You know, they're held up as the standard for their group. When in reality, gay people are just diverse and unique as straight people are. The only difference should be sexual preference, but I think that we live in such a way that it's not. That we've created other differences.
Yeah, you know, it's so interesting with the Jason Collins situation that, you know, that as far as him coming out this week, the conversations that have come, you know, really focusing on, oh, how do you think people will feel, you know, having a gay teammate? How do you think people will feel about this or that? And you know, I hear that, and it's, you know, I heard that on sports radio, and I think to myself, what changed? I mean, unless you're in a relationship with this person, and you know, this person hasn't been honest about the fact, hey, you know what, I like the same sex or something like that. It doesn't really affect anything. I mean, if you're a basketball player, you're a basketball player. All of a sudden, finding out that your, you know, teammate likes. I mean, it's like finding out your teammate loves a particular band. I mean, that doesn't do anything. You know, it doesn't affect their actual jump shot. It doesn't affect, you know, their ability to rebound or play the game, which is why you all are together in the first place. So the fact that we still in that question of what do you think people are going to do? What are their reactions going to be to having a gay teammate? Like, you know what? That's still a teammate. You just happen to find out something else about them. It's like finding out, oh, so you actually were class trained in piano as a child? Okay, wow. Let's go play basketball. You know?
Yeah.
I feel like it really shouldn't matter, and yet, you know, even how the way we're starting the conversation, you know, now that he's come out, is what are people going to do? What's going to be your action? And I feel like the way we're even framing the conversation is setting it up to do what it's always done, which is treating homosexuals as the other, as that mystical thing that we don't understand. When gays have been around us for a long time. You know, they've been around us most likely even in biblical times. So, you know, homosexuality is not a new thing.
Yeah. Tyler, do you want to say anything?
It's interesting that you mentioned Jason Collins, because apparently he was college roommates with Joe Kennedy, congressman from Massachusetts. And he talked about in an interview being jealous of Joe Kennedy for being able to march openly and in the Boston Pride Parade. And yeah, so Joe Kennedy, who's straight, is marching in the Pride Parade to show his support for LGBT issues. And Jason Collins, who at the time wasn't out publicly, couldn't march, couldn't be who he was in the street. So there is a really interesting political dimension to it too. So it's not all about the mainstreaming. Like there's still some hurdles to get over.
Oh, there's definitely some huge hurdles to get over.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely a different way of looking at allies versus actual gay and lesbian people. I think sometimes people are more comfortable hearing someone say, "Oh, I'm an ally to gay people," than hearing someone say, "I'm a gay person" or "I'm a lesbian person."
Oh, it's a huge it's a huge difference. I mean, it's the difference between someone, it's kind of like, for me, it goes hand in hand with the expression that's kind of been lampooned as, when someone gets accused of being racist, it's like, oh, but one of my friends is black. It's like, well, that's great, but that doesn't mean you're not racist. It just means you have a black friend. So saying, hey, I'm an advocate of gay rights and being gay is like, well, they're different. You may support one, but supporting one does not mean living that life and, having the burden that comes with being that, in this world. So, yeah, I completely agree that there is a pretty huge difference between, those who march in support of gay rights and those who are gay marching in support of gay rights.
Yeah, and I think that we often forget that there's even a certain level of prejudice within the gay community. I had a friend who was transgender, and he was transitioning into man. And before he had his surgery, he was dating a woman. And my lesbian friend said, "They're lesbians." And I said, "No, that's a straight couple before he's transitioned." And she said, "No, she's a girl and they're lesbians." And that's definitely a form of prejudice within the LGBT community that we often overlook. And we forget that it really is pervasive. The amount of prejudice about all different kinds of facets, it's definitely in every community to some extent.
All right, so do you guys hear me? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Is Tyler speaking? Sorry, I had to mute him because there was an echo coming from his end.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Go ahead, Tyler. Sorry about that.
His picture's frozen on my screen. Am I the only person that's having that?
Yeah, no,
that's weird.
It's frozen, but it's okay. Tyler, go ahead.
All right, cool. So, as someone who's disabled and queer, I mean, I've seen some really weird, not necessarily anti-disability behavior, but like reservations from people who I wouldn't really expect to be reserved. Like, I've had a couple guys ask me if my dick works, and I was just like, what? What is that exactly? I don't, and it's not that kind of thing where you can be like, oh, well, would you like to find out? Because I don't really want to sleep with that dude if he's going to ask me that question.
Right. Absolutely.
So what I was going to say is, what was interesting is, I think, Shelby, you mentioned it just before about, or Cornell, you might have mentioned it, just the whole, women versus male sort of comparison. And, I thought what was interesting is I heard someone talking about it today where they were like, Brittany Griner just came out. She's that star college basketball player who came out, said that she was gay. and no one was talking about it basically at all. Like it really like it came out and it happened, and then this Jason Collins thing came out, and it's like all over the news. And I was wondering if you guys, maybe Shelby, you want to start because I thought you brought it up, but I might be wrong. If you wanted to maybe talk about that and why that might be and what that's all about, can you go into that?
Yeah, I think that people have this perception that women are much more understanding and women are much more accepting, especially of other women. That's not necessarily true. And but Brittany Griner, several women before her, several women professional athletes have played while gay, while openly gay. And what they did by telling not just their teammates but everybody else that they're gay is really brave. And we forget that because we sort of see gayness as through a male lens. I think very often we see men being gay and we equate that with acting like women, right? Like, but we don't talk about women being gay as negatively all the time. Like often you'll hear like, oh, that's so hot if she's gay, let me watch. Or, like I can accept two girls holding hands because two girlfriends could hold hands, so two girlfriends can hold hands too. But it's harder for people to accept sometimes gay male, but we forget that it's still hard for lesbians. Brittany Griner just came out very soon after Mr. Collins, but there have been several openly lesbian players, and just to name a few, I have this list up because I sort of got it ready. In 2012, Megan Rapinoe, a soccer player, Lori Lindsay from soccer, Amber Harris from basketball, Jessica Ader from basketball, Simone Augustus from basketball, and those are all just recent ones, but on several different websites that I follow, I've seen really, really large lists of not just women, but also men who have played in other sports, like boxers and tennis players, which maybe we don't consider part of the big professional sports like football and basketball, but they're still professional. They're still professional players who are openly gay, or were openly gay while they were professional players.
I really think there is something to what Shelby said as far as overall there being some greater amount of acceptance as far as lesbians lesbian professional athletes as opposed to gay male athletes. And it's interesting because I grew up in Texas, so I remember seeing clips of Brittany Griner before she went to college, and I was like just stunned. I was like, oh my God, she's ridiculous. And it's really interesting because while I didn't think about it in my head, I remember as her name got bigger and people started to know more about her, even before she went to Baylor, there was a question, oh, is she gay? Is she so dominant? Look at the way that she is, look at the way she plays, look at the way she carries herself, I feel like when it comes to some female gay athletes, there's already that like, oh, we figured that was the case before. I feel like the first athlete that I remember coming out, especially female athlete, that was gay, that actually kind of shocked me because I never really caught that vibe, or it never really felt like, okay, maybe she might be gay. Was I believe it was Shel Swoop? No, not Shel Swoop. Lisa Leslie of the LA I think Spartan WNBA. And when that happened, I was like, wow, okay. And I felt like it was even bigger because she is African American, and as I've talked about before in these conversations, the African American community and homosexuality, there's a real love-hate relationship there. And so when she came out, because she was so beautiful and she was like a model and she was stud WNBA basketball player, like near the top of her game, to have her come out and pretty much dash the hopes of her being this other heterosexual, wonderful, traditional woman that I'm sure many in the black community want her to be, I was really shocked. And I was like, wow, I wonder how this is going to play out. I wonder if she's going to lose endorsements. I wonder if girls and families are going to stop wanting to, support her because, oh, well, she's gay. And I'm not a huge follower of the WNBA, and as far as I can tell, there wasn't any kind of huge backlash. So, I think that goes to show what you talked about as far as homosexuality within women being something that is more okay, and not as big a shock to the collective ego as say a male athlete. Because if we've got a man playing a manly sport like basketball or football in their game, I mean, what does that mean about all men across this country? So there's such an attachment to what masculinity means in this culture that a man who was not previously known to be gay coming out as gay in a sport or in a occupation that is so attached to masculinity, to traditional masculinity. I feel like that's one of the reasons why Jason Collins coming out is such a bigger deal. And before this conversation, I didn't even know that Brittany Griner came out, and I'm just finding this out right now. Again, because it hasn't been nearly as publicized as Collins was.
Well, when I think about athletes coming out, I think about go all the way back to ancient Rome. When you wonder maybe how many of the gladiators were sleeping together. You don't know all of that. But that's sort of a different culture, but at the same time, you can look at our star athletes as modern gladiators without the blood and gore. So, I don't know. Thoughts, everybody?
No, I completely agree. There is so much about Roman culture and Greece that is at the foundation of who we are as a culture and what we aspire to be. Democracy and football and so many things that can be so easily connected to the gladiator times and games of that era. And it's also widely known that philosophers like Plato and Socrates, like men of that wisdom and of that stature at that time, they regularly slept with younger men under their charge, and it was like kind of part of the relationship. And so that's known. And Tyler, I think you make a good point. It's not something that people really talk about because all we in this country want to remember is democracy. We want to remember the Colosseum. We want to remember all those things that are nice and make us feel strong. And admitting that part of the culture and that part of the history for a lot of people, and say a majority of people, makes them question. Okay, wait. What does it really mean, to be gay? What does it mean that people that we follow and that we've read throughout the history of our country, these men may have been gay. We might have called them gay. What does that mean for our society? So I think that's huge, and I think it's really fascinating that it doesn't get brought up more. I mean, it doesn't really get brought up much at all, except for the occasional movie where you see it alluded to that. It never really is there on the table.
I think it's also worth remembering that the way that homosexuality existed then is completely different than the way it exists now. I mean, in Greek and Roman times, it was inconceivable to have a monogamous, loving, mutual homosexual relationship. And that doesn't mean that something radical has changed about homosexual people. It just means that something radical has changed about the way we have sexualized relationships. Because I would argue that it was also kind of impossible to have that kind of relationship heterosexually. Women were seen as property. slaves were seen as property. Pretty much anyone you had sex with was seen as property to you in some capacity. And I think that once got rid of that sort of point of view more throughout history, we've been able to conceive of other kinds of relationships being mutual and caring that we wouldn't have thought of that way as before. But I think it is worth remembering also that there have been homosexual people that we look up to now in the past. And their homosexuality did not hinder their ability to help society or to bring forth really brilliant and important ideas. And that's sort of something that people are saying about Jason Collins. Like, people are saying very disparaging comments, saying, no wonder he missed that one shot that one time. It's because he's gay. And it's like, no, you know, who he chooses to have sex with, his sexual experience has no effect whatsoever on his ability to play a game. But what does have an effect is the way that he's received by other people, because that sort of reception can completely change someone's happiness, someone's mood. You know, if everybody rejects you, you're not going to be good at playing basketball because you're not going to be happy with your life. But if everyone accepts you, you're going to live up to your greatest potential. It's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy when everyone creates this huge backlash. If Jason Collins is paying attention to that part instead of to the plenty of people who definitely support him.
Yeah, I you know, there's a scene from the movie In and Out just popped into my head. And it was a scene when the kids, the students of Kevin Kline's character, you know, find out first hear that he might be gay or that people are saying he's gay, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, you know, hey, you were one of his best students, you know, you all really close, you know, does that mean you're gay? And all that questioning, and then someone finally says, you know what, stop. You wouldn't have gotten through English without Mr. Brackett. You wouldn't have gotten through this for this person. He's still the same person that has been supporting you and that, you know, you have, you know, loved and been close with this whole time. You know, it's not different now that he might be gay. And there's that question, oh, but isn't it? Because they're different. And it's really sad that, you know, one word, one piece of knowledge about somebody can't, you know, in this culture, still so completely blanket their existence and, you know, put a shadow over an illustrious past, because, you know, we as a society are still so caught up in our identities and our connections to what masculinity means, what femininity is, what it means to be in a relationship, when if you look at our views on relationships in this country and what is popular, a lot of that has come not so much from, you know, relationships and wisdom, you know, like hundreds of years ago. A lot of it came from Puritans and their interpretation of the Bible and of God's law. And it's, you know, it's so interesting that this small population in our country's history had such a huge effect on how we relate with each other, how we see certain things, what is valuable, what isn't valuable, you know, what one word can do to our connection to people that otherwise we may have absolutely wanted to be and emulate, but now, well, you're not gay, so you can't do that because now you're a completely different person.
Yeah, I think... Oh, go ahead, Tyler.
I don't know that we could really be having this discussion. I don't know that without intense reactionary definitions of what it is to be a man or a woman and what sex acts are sanctioned and what sex acts aren't, there would be no second thought about any of this. I mean, I really, you don't understand it. And I read an article today. It was about this evangelical blogger and these people who really think that because the gay rights side is now winning the argument, that they're an oppressed minority. Personally, I don't buy it. Because they're the ones doing the oppressing of the minorities. You don't get to play both sides like that.
Yeah. Well, and that's what people in power, feeling their power, that's what they do. They one blame the victim, and then once that doesn't work, they become the victim. It's like, well, everybody is giving power to this victim over here, so I can't beat them. I might as well join them, and then out victim them. And I've heard that before, where they're like, oh, we're oppressed. It's like, no one is saying that you have to believe a certain way. They're actually saying you don't get to tell other people what they believe. I've got a number of friends and people in my life that are gay, and I've not heard one of them say, you know what, I wish we could just abolish all religion, or I wish that we could just completely change the definition of what these people over here, call marriage. They don't care about any of that. Most of them be able to be who they are. They don't want to change how other people are. They want to be allowed to fully be who they are, and that's it. So you can't really oppress anybody if you're not telling them what they have to believe. This conversation of gay rights has never been a conversation about people who are, proponents of gay rights saying that people who don't agree with gay rights have to agree. There's nothing saying that. It's saying you can disagree all you want, and you can live that disagreement out in your life and what you do, and even maybe what you teach your kids. And you don't have the right to wholesale say what other people who don't believe like you believe what they can do. And so that's where the whole argument of, oh, we're oppressed, it just goes out the window. Because I'm sorry, I love baseball. Every freaking game I watch, 7th inning, I get to hear God Bless America. It kind of makes me want to tear what little hair I have out, because that really doesn't have anything to do with baseball. But you know what? Somebody decided, oh, we need to sing God Bless America because of war or whatnot, and there it is. And, the Pledge of Allegiance, and on our money. God is everywhere, in this country. So when I hear people, who worship God and follow God, tell me, oh, well, now, God-fearing people are oppressed. It's like, no, you're not. You're not oppressed in any way. The great thing about this country is that if you don't like what's going on, you can, make your argument and maybe convince people otherwise. Or, you know what? You can go somewhere else. Like, we're not going to keep you here. We're not going to keep you hostage and say, no, you have to live here and you have to believe what we believe. You can do what you want. Just don't tell someone else that they have to do what you want.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting to look at people's sort of defense mechanisms when they get called out on their privilege. Because I think it happens when someone says, oh, well, I don't like gay people, and I'm the one who's oppressed by all these gay people, and they're ruining my marriage. And what they're really saying is, I'm not willing to look at my own privilege that I have that gay people don't have. And I'm not willing to see the ways that I subtly am oppressing gay people just by living my life in this way. Even if I don't go to anti-gay rallies, even if I don't actually oppose gay people, it's really hard for people to look at themselves and say, I actually have it a lot better than these people. I personally have it a lot better than someone else. And in a small way, it is my fault because I don't acknowledge it. And then people get very defensive when you tell them, you know what, you're in a position of privilege, and like you said, like you get to hear God bless America. That's a privilege that Christian people have, that people of other religions or of no religion, they don't have that. Exactly. And and a lot of Christians will claim that they are worse. Like they are the ones who are oppressed. They actually, because you're pointing this out, you are now oppressing me. And that's a lot of what gay opponents will say. Like, because you pointed out this inequity, I am now being oppressed. And I think that that's a real problem in the conversation. But it's something to know that happens. Like, it definitely happens. People saying that they are oppressed because someone has pointed out inequality without really looking at the inequality, without really looking and seeing, what, like, this is an important issue. This is an important issue to know about. This is an important issue to advocate for. Or this is an important issue to completely ignore but not actively oppose just because I may lose a few things that I'm privileged to have in order that oppressed people will no longer be oppressed. And I know that when I word it that way, when I talk to some people, it changes the conversation. It definitely changes the conversation when we talk about true oppression and true privilege. And sometimes it changes it to silence because some people really don't want to talk about it. But sometimes it really can get the conversation going. Not that my goal is to change someone's mind, but my goal is not to have a conversation go down the road of, well, actually, because you pointed out that I'm in a position of privilege, I'm now oppressed. Because by forcing me to talk about it, you've made my life harder, I think some people have that syndrome, definitely.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Officially talk about the word faggot a little bit, right? Was that?
So there was just a little bit of what you said cut out. I didn't hear them.
Oh, so I think before I came into the conversation, you guys were talking a little bit about like the implications of the word faggot, right?
Just a little.
So there's like that. Yeah, and so that's the other thing. Like when you people that history lesson of they use the word faggot because gay people were too low to even deserve a stake to be burned on. Right. And they would throw them on the fire with the other faggots, the other bundles of sticks.
Right.
And it's interesting because fascist and faggot actually have the same root word. It's like the symbol for fascism was a bundle of sticks. And so you have fascists who are actively opposing gay people. And Mussolini's daughter has a seat in the Italian parliament. And there's a transgender member of parliament that called her out and said, Alessandro Mussolini is an open fascist. And she said it's better to be a fascist than a faggot. And so, so when you finish that and you put the history behind it to back you up, people get really scared and really threatened. It's insane.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because what we were talking about, you came in, was about how people understand like the actual meaning of words, and you question them on that. They get scared. They're like, oh, okay. So wait, now I have to actually know why I'm saying what I'm saying and actually understand what it means. And yeah, I remember. I don't know. okay, well now that actually is piecing it together. And and then the first time I really looked up the word, found out what the most popular definition of gay is, which is like happy, joyful. And so it's like, okay, so you're calling these people who are in relationships or like sexually people of the same gender, you're calling them sticks, and you're calling them happy. I don't understand how those words somehow made it into into our language and just became what they are. 'Cause, I know plenty of homosexual people, and they're not all happy. And none of them are bundles of sticks. So it's again, just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying, Tyler. When people realize the history of words they're using, and really the definition of the words they're using, yeah, they really have to stop and think about it. And when they have to think, and they aren't just allowed to speak without any kind of knowledge, then yeah, like their ability to communicate is frozen, and they start questioning everything. Like, oh wait, should I? No, then they almost kind of become paralyzed. They're like, oh wait, I have to think about everything. Like, no, you don't have to think about everything. Just be aware, and be aware of the people around you who you're talking to, and if you see some body language that says, oh wait, that word you used is not necessarily something that I'm comfortable with, think about what you said, or ask, hey, did I say something that made you feel a certain way? And go there, as opposed to just saying whatever sounds like, sounds cool, or whatever you hear around you. So I'm not sure. I see on this little type discussion that I don't know if our conversation, Max, are we still recording? I know we don't see him anymore.
We don't see.
Okay.
We're in Max. I don't know.
Okay. Yes. All right. Excellent. Just wanted to make sure. So it's Tyler. I've sometimes I've heard half of what you said. Did I hear you? Did I hear you say that you are gay, or no? Did I mishear something? Tyler?
I'll type a message just in case.
Okay. Oh yeah, he's
Oh.
well, maybe because he's still viewing, so he hasn't left the conversation. Maybe he's gonna
Okay.
reconnect. Yeah, because Max just wrote he must have frozen up. But it's I've made this point before, and I feel like it's still really important and pertinent to the conversation, and it is that gay rights are citizen rights as far as I'm concerned, and any kind of rights that people want to infringe based on religious belief or doctrine really sets a dangerous precedent that in most cases throughout history don't fare well for people, because you come in saying, okay, we're going to do this and it's going to be led by this type of religion. Well, eventually those governments are overcome, they're toppled, and then another religion comes in and says, okay, this is what we're going to do, and it's really different from what was here before. And the people who were in power before are like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. And so, when I hear people, basing their disagreement and their anti gay rights views on, oh well, this is what this is what the Bible tells me, and these are my beliefs, and I'm not going to change who I am, because I have faith, and all for people having faith. I'm for people, believing in whatever religion they want to believe in. And once you start setting up what rights people can and cannot have based on a religion, and that goes through, you're waiting for that boomerang to come around, and for you to be the person that is not of the majority religion, and all of a sudden these rights that you like, this privilege, as you said, Shelby, that you have enjoyed, well, guess what? That privilege is now gone because, well, we now have a theocracy, and your belief is not in power anymore. So guess what? You get to live by their beliefs now, and I don't know any anti-gay rights person whose beliefs are based on religion that would want any part. Hey, Tyler, you're back.
Hey.
But I was just discussing, the difficulty of people who base their anti-gay rights on religion, and how historically that plays out. I was just saying that once you decide to keep certain people from having rights based on a religious belief, you're really setting a dangerous precedent. Okay, no problem. But you're really setting a dangerous precedent for the future, because the theocracy is based on a religious power, and the moment your religion gets out of power, you're really up a creek. And there's no debate, there's no conversation, there's no, oh, hey, let's talk about this. No, we're not having discussions. We're in a theocracy, and we're in power, and our religion says you do this. So you either do this, or we're going to jail you, or we're going to kill you, or, we're going to do something with you, because we don't want your kind, we don't want your religious beliefs to gain any foothold here. And so by, saying, oh, well, this country was based on religious beliefs and on God-fearing people, and is how we should look at, gay rights, it's like, no, because there's any number of rights that come up for questioning once you do that, and there's no way to argue for or against rights being connected to religion, because it's a very private thing, it's a very personal, individual thing, and you cannot use an individual understanding and religious belief and doctrine and say, hey, this is what I personally believe, and now everybody, all the millions of people in this area now have to follow my personal interpretation and understanding of this doctrine, I believe.
It gets really dicey when you have religions that aren't Christianity that are anti-gay, because they're also affected by Christian hegemony in different ways.
Right.
But they have their own hegemonic tendencies. So, what do we do there? Is it up to the folks who believe that stuff, or are raised in those traditions to say no, or can we, from outside of that, legitimately say no to things like being stoned to death if you're gay, and a lot of the stuff that's gone on in Uganda to kill Israel and stuff like that. That's very obviously wrong.
Right.
But we as U.S. citizens kind of don't have the authority to say, all right, we're going to go in there and change that.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have anything to add, Shelby?
Um, I guess like that when something I've noticed sort of is that throughout this conversation, when we talk about like gay and lesbian rights, sometimes we leave out bisexual people. And I don't know. I know that the B for bisexual is part of LGBT, but sometimes people feel uncomfortable including bisexual people in gay rights. And a lot of people often refer to bisexuality as like just a phase, or say things like, if you're bisexual in a relationship, then you're not bisexual. You're just attracted to the person that you're with. And I think that statement like those really discount bisexuality, and sometimes it sort of shows our own sort of queer privilege when we talk about gay rights and we don't include some people. Just like, when we talk about religious rights, we sort of all assumed that we meant Christian rights.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of shows that we have a mindset in America that everyone sort of shares, and we all recognize the thing that has privilege. Like straight people have privilege, such that when someone says, "Oh, here's my friend Jeff," you sort of assume that Jeff is straight. Or if you say, "This is my religious friend Jeff," you sort of assume that Jeff is a Christian. And sometimes it even goes so far as when you talk about someone like, "Oh, this is my friend Jeff," talk about them on the phone and you don't see the friend, you might assume the friend has a certain race or culture depending on who's introducing you. Like you might assume that since your friend introducing Jeff is white, then Jeff must be white. Or, your friend introducing Jeff is Middle Eastern, so Jeff is probably Middle Eastern. We make those sort of assumptions all the time. And I think it's important to realize that those assumptions are natural. And that's just the way that people are. We like to group things, but we don't have to group things just because we like it. And we don't have to just let ourselves make those assumptions all the time. I think it's good to recognize that we do leave out bisexual people from the gay rights conversation. And we leave out certain queer people who maybe have other ways that we would define them. Like I know that Tyler sometimes is seen as a different kind of queer person for being disabled, or is not fully included in the queer community for being disabled, which is wrong. Yeah.
Really, you get the does your dick work, and you get the, oh, well, is it just a phase? Who are you into more? No, I'm into people.
Yeah.
I meet someone, I'm attracted to them. It doesn't mean I don't care what they have between their legs. It just means I'm good with anything in between.
Right.
And so, when you talk about a bisexuality and being in a monogamous relationship with either a same-sex or an opposite-sex partner, that's where you've got to start, at least I think, renegotiating monogamy to account for sexual preference. If it isn't realistic for a relationship with one